Hello, I'm Susan Arsenault and welcome to Real Estate Today. Today we have a guest, David Sherwood from Sherwood Inspections. Is that right?
Good morning, Sherwood Inspection Services.
Services, okay. And I'm going to have David talk to you a little bit about himself, and after that I have some specific questions to ask him. David, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Great.
And your company?
Well, as you know, Dave Sherwood, Sherwood Inspection Services, and I've been doing home inspections since 1982. We do home inspections, commercial building inspections, and environmental testing. We do it for real estate transactions and outside of real estate transactions. We're really more of a go-to resource for anything in the home or building related. And we spend a lot of time teaching people both on site and over the phone.
Environmental issues. Could you give me some examples of that?
Sure. Water testing, radon testing, mold,
Okay.
Mold evaluation, which does include water intrusion, which causes the mold.
Okay.
Why is the mold there?
Yeah.
And what do you do about the water itself or the moisture that caused the mold to grow?
Okay. And so what happens if someone found mold or they have mold? Do you have a group that takes care of that for you, remediates it?
The industry is changing really fast, and it used to be that on many materials you had to remove the material itself. Now there are new enzyme killers that can now take care of the mold in place.
Oh, really?
Now, sometimes it's effective and sometimes you have to do more remediation as well. But for the most part, that's a much faster and cheaper way to go. So we do have a company that we work with that takes care of that. And
All right.
it
It's
certainly
not
is
your
cheaper.
company, it's somebody else.
Correct.
I see. All right. So
We
that's-
do the evaluation, we do the education, we do the testing, and then we tell them what needs to be done. Then the remediation guys come in, do what we need them to do, and then we follow up afterwards and make sure everything's done right.
So it would be the same thing with radon, because we're very familiar with that. You guys find the radon, and then someone else comes in and takes care of it.
Correct.
Okay, all
Yes.
right. As far as the real estate transactions, all right, there are three very big components to it, all right? Someone buys a house.
Yes.
You negotiate the price. The inspections are a very big issue.
Yes.
And then the financing, of course, the mortgage commitment and getting your final commitment from the bank,
Right.
all right? We've been having, the industry, the real estate people, we've had a very decent year this year, but not quite as great as we thought it was going to be. All right,
Yeah.
so it's been a good year. But we've had problems with inspections. Have you felt that at your end at all, that people have been calling you more after they have an inspection, asking you more questions? Because in my whole history, I've sold real estate for over 25 years.
Yes.
I never had really deals fall apart because of inspections, but they are falling apart today because of inspections. People are walking away.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that? Are you experiencing that at your end?
Well, unfortunately, we're not in contact with the buyers or the clients after we do the inspection, unless they call us.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and sometimes they'll call us and they'll ask us more detailed questions, but for the most part, they're taking the report and they're working off that.
Okay.
So I'm not sure what's happening in the industry. I certainly know that I hear from realtors that more deals are breaking down at the inspection end. Now, whether that's the inspector or whether it's the process, based on what I'm seeing of my clients,
Yeah.
a lot more of them are coming in with different expectations. The whole idea of the home inspection and the home inspection process is to educate the buyer, let them see the house through our eyes, untainted or uncolored by my wants or desires, and have them be able to say, okay, is this what I was expecting? Is this what I
Exactly.
need for me and my family? And so it's a little different way of looking at it because they already love the house when they get into it,
Yeah.
or at least supposedly. And some people are having a little different attitude about it, almost like, okay, you're not going to get me this time. I know someone that got hurt before or whatever. And that's not the way to get into it. There is an emotional charge to it
Yeah.
that didn't seem to be there before. And so I think they're maybe misusing the inspection at times to negotiate out of place. For an example, the other day I was doing an inspection and the gentleman took what I said as a maintenance item and then referred it back to the realtor and the homeowner that it was an immediate repair and it needed to be done and it was non-negotiable. Well, I had to clarify it. That's not what I said, and that it's a maintenance item, which means that it's an ongoing care for the house.
Yep.
That's very different than a repair, something that's broken, not working, or
That's right.
unsafe.
Okay.
And so that's how we break it down for them.
Yeah, well, that's the nice thing about your report and a lot of other reports is you categorize it, you
Yes.
know, maintenance, immediate repair, and what's the other one?
Upgrade.
An upgrade, okay. All right, so can you give me an example of an upgrade?
Sure, an upgrade would be anything that could be brought up to today's standards, either for long-term longevity or it performs better.
Okay.
So if you, for example, you have a house in the 60s, now today, because we use coffee makers and blenders and juicers and all those things, it would now be more safe to put GFIs in the kitchen counter, outlets, and so on. They didn't have those back in the 60s, but
Okay.
nor did they have all the appliances back then.
there, yeah.
So that's an upgrade that would bring it up for safer conditions based on today's usage.
Okay, and so that would be an upgrade. What about a maintenance issue?
Maintenance item is painting, caulking,
Okay,
anything that you do on a routine basis, changing your filter in the heating system, that kind of thing, cleaning your ductwork in the heating system.
And what about
any of that.
immediate repair?
Immediate repair is anything that is broken, not working the way it was intended, or was not installed the way it was supposed to, or unsafe conditions. And an unsafe condition would be an exposed electrical wire, a cable that's running across the surface where they're not supposed to,
Okay.
anything like that.
All right, so you're saying that perhaps the buyer is getting those issues confused.
Yes.
What's a maintenance and what's an upgrade and what's an immediate fix?
Yes.
And so they're because in our contract it says it has to be mechanical or structural. It has to be something that's not working or something that's falling down. That's,
Yes.
you know, a leaky roof or something like that.
Yes. We color code all of our
Yeah, you
comments,
do.
so it makes it really clear what's a repair, maintenance versus upgrade.
Uh-huh.
And so our hope is that's going to help both you, the realtor, but also the client really understand the magnitude of it. And we really take time and care to be able to educate them. And you know, if it's something that they want to negotiate, that's up to them. We don't normally get into that part of it, but it is our job to be able to not make it bigger than it is and not make it smaller than it is, and give it to them exactly the way it's intended so that they completely understand the condition in its current state.
Well, any home that you own, you have to maintain it. You have
Sure.
to keep up with it. You have to paint it. You have to take care of it. Otherwise, it starts falling apart at your ankles, and it you know, and it shows when you don't love a house and don't take care of a house.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, if you take a look at the cost of maintenance on a yearly basis versus the cost of when it's already failed and what that's going to take to bring it back, you're losing a ton of money. Probably, you know, I've heard numbers of somewhere around 300 to 600% greater by repairs than it is if you catch it when it's a maintenance. And I guess that depends on the item and what
Well,
it is you're talking about, but it certainly is a larger cost.
That's where the roofs have been a big issue because if the roof is failing, we'll say it has a leak or a couple of the shingles have blown away because of the storm and stuff like that.
Yes.
How do you handle a roof when you look at a roof and it has some minor things that are wrong with it? I mean, I know that on the state disclosures, that's another whole issue is the state disclosures. The homeowner takes a look at those and looks at them very, very carefully.
Yes.
And so we'll say that the roof is 12 years old and it's starting, a few shingles are missing, it might have a leak. How do you handle something like that?
Well, we've got two components here that you talked about. One is the disclosure form, so let's get into that in a little bit.
Okay.
But first, let's talk about the roofs and answer that question. A lot of it depends on the type of roof. Are we talking about a roof that is an asphalt shingle roof? Are we talking about metal standing seam roof, slate roofs? Those are all different in cost, in maintenance, and in how long they're going to last.
That's right.
So for the moment, because most people have asphalt shingles,
That's
let's
right.
take asphalt shingles. If we come out and we inspect and we find that there are a few shingles that are broken, tabs that are missing simply because of a storm damage, let's take a look at the overall roof, its condition, its age, and how long it would last if you didn't have those broken areas.
Okay.
So we take a look at that and say it's about 10 years old approximately, and you've got maybe another 10 to 15 years left on it.
Okay.
That's a good quality roof that's doing just what it's supposed to do for its age.
Okay.
However, due to storm conditions, a branch falling and breaking it, or wind catching it and pulling it off, then we have to look at installation. Was it sealed down properly? And if not, that's what caused it to catch the wind, to catch it and pull it off. If it is, and it was just these few conditions, then we can say just some minor patching needs to be done, and that would be a care of the roof, a maintenance
Is that,
item.
I was just going to say, is that
Yeah,
go under maintenance?
That would be a maintenance item. But if it's something that's broken where it's actually leaking through the roof, then it becomes a repair. Now, it could be a minor repair, and it could be just a touch up here or there, but because it's leaking, it's got to be tended to right away. And
All
so
right.
that becomes a repair item.
I'm laughing because at the office the other day, we had a whole big discussion about roof repair.
Yeah.
And they were asking the question to everybody, would you, if you had a 30-year roof and it was year 28, would you go and replace the roof? I said, no, not unless it's leaking. I'd be up in my attic looking to make sure everything is fine and making sure I have no leaks coming in any windows. And if it was fine, I would just continue going, you know? And a lot of people said that that's being from New Hampshire, that I'm not dealing with reality and I wouldn't be fixing my roof. And most people said they would take it off and put a new roof.
Yeah.
Is that how? I don't think that's how people think.
Well, it would be interesting to be in that conversation and hear the different takes on it. But what I think is really important is sometimes when a roof starts to leak, you don't see it from the attic.
You don't?
No. So
Okay.
unless it leaks really bad.
Okay.
So it can leak and saturate into the roof sheathing before it ever starts to come through into
All
the
right,
attic
so when you're
area.
talking about sheathing, you're talking about plywood.
Could be plywood, could be wood,
Okay.
tongue and groove,
Okay.
or butted up. And so because
Yeah,
of
I
that,
know.
if that catches it and it starts to decay the roof sheathing, well, now instead of a repair of just a tab, you're going to have to strip the whole thing, replace the whole plywood.
Yeah, that's
That's
a big,
why it's
expensive.
important to evaluate the condition and the age of that roof when you're making that decision.
But how do you do that? I mean, how does a homeowner do that?
Well, a homeowner shouldn't. At that point, when they know the roof is beyond, say, 10, 15 years old, they should be getting someone in to help them, a roofer, an inspector, someone that knows what it looks like when it starts aging, what it looks
Okay.
like when it starts to become brittle and starts to break down in the material itself. And then we can better assess what needs to be done.
All right, so I was all wet. That's how much I know about roofing. I guess I've never had roof problems, so I'll put it out as that.
That's
All right.
why we're the resource for people.
All right, how about another big issue is always the furnaces.
Yes.
They, you know, sometimes some of the homes have old furnaces that have been just chugging along and they have all their maintenance and they've been taken care of, but the new homeowner, the new buyer wants a new furnace because it's 20 years old. So
Yes.
how do we handle that?
Well, the best way to do it is if the homeowner or the buyer and the inspector get together and the inspector is good, he will explain to them about where it is in its lifespan,
Okay.
be able to evaluate its current condition and its operating condition and teach them about that.
Okay.
You should also talk a little bit about its maintenance and care, and that way the homeowner's really got a handle on it. Now, boilers are different than furnaces.
Okay.
When we look
They
at
are.
boilers, there's a lot more working parts, and you're introducing fresh air at a level where it's got fresh water, thus fresh air, causing corrosion inside that boiler. You don't have that with a furnace.
Okay.
So therefore, the lifespan of a furnace could be longer than a boiler, depending on the material that the boiler is made of, and whether you've got a closed loop or open loop in the boiler. But going back to the furnace for a moment, when the furnace, you've got components inside, and the major component is your fan unit. Just because that breaks doesn't mean you need a new furnace.
Okay.
So if the furnace is maintained properly, and you're not introducing a lot of water by, say, a failed humidifier system, then you should be able to maintain that furnace for a very long time and be able to get far more than the manufacturer intended its life to be.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So is this similar to the roof where if you're not sure if you have an older furnace that you should have it evaluated before you put your house on the market. So you have some
Absolutely.
proper documentation on it.
Documentation and education. on
Okay,
it.
all right. So what should we say? I'm going back to the roof. I mean, so if you have a report and it says that the roof is 28 years old and it's a 30-year-old roof, can the buyer expect to be reimbursed on part of the roof, all the roof? I mean, I'm just asking you, what's reasonable?
Okay, well, this gets into what we
It's
talked
really-
about, where we were starting to touch on the disclosure portion.
Okay.
If the seller discloses, and I've created a video to assist sellers on filling out that disclosure form, because as
You have?
you know, realtors
You're
can't do
kidding.
that. No.
No, we cannot touch those
Right.
those forms.
And so what happens is most of the time the sellers fill it out improperly. They leave information out, either they don't
All the
think it's
time.
pertinent, or,
All
well,
the
I
time.
already fixed it, it's not important. It could be important because when the inspector comes in and sees signs that something's been fixed, but they don't know if it's been fixed right or they don't have access to it, it raises red flags, particularly for the client when I can't answer a question. So if I could be there with the seller, by virtue of this video, the seller learns how to fill it out completely, leaving out any unanswered questions. And when that's done, now the buyer can come in with more confidence. And when the home inspector says, well, we got a stain here, yep, it's been identified, this was the cause of the stain, this is what was done to fix it, done, we can
Okay,
put it to
we're
bed.
definitely doing a show on that. Can we do that?
Absolutely.
All right, because what happens if something, they lived in the house for 25 years and it was repaired 20 years ago? We're going to have 10 pages of state disclosures.
What I tell people, and I'll say this in the video, put a 3-ring binder together. And in that 3-ring binder should be an inspection report. They can get a pre-listing inspection done on it.
We're gonna talk
That
about
gives
that.
them a base mark. From there, they can go ahead and say, okay, these are all the items that I'm going to fix. These are the items I'm not going to fix. Now they're in control of the situation.
Okay.
It could be, if they've been there 20 years, 30 years, that they do have 3, 4, 5 pages of items and 4 or 5 pages of receipts in there. Anything that shows up in signs of needing repair or were repaired, then they should comment on it.
All right, I'm going to give you an example of what happened. A transaction fell apart because of it. My homeowner had a small furnace leak and had it
Yes.
fixed maybe 3 years ago.
Yes.
So she was down in the lower level with a potential buyer, and she was talking about, they were looking at something else. And she said, oh yeah, we had a little leak there. Well, he went back to the
Disclosure.
state disclosure,
Yeah,
and it wasn't on there.
absolutely.
So he wanted them to redo the disclosure.
Yes.
And the seller felt that he was saying that they were lying, that they
Yes.
were liars. And so the deal fell apart. I mean, it was like what didn't matter what we had to say, the two parties, they didn't want to sell to him, and he didn't want to buy that house.
And that's exactly
And
my point.
that's a really difficult situation.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to the philosophy of some of these buyers. They are really concerned because they know of stories, or they themselves have been taken advantage of,
everybody hears
where
the
either the
worst.
mortgage company didn't disclose things properly or put them in the wrong mortgage before, they lost their house, they lost their job,
That's right.
whatever.
Yep, yep.
The whole environment seems to be less trusting today than it has been in the
Unbelievable.
past.
Yeah.
So because of that, now you've got buyers in a situation where they want everything disclosed. So disclose it. As a seller, tell everything. Tell a story, paint a picture for them, but you're still in control. See, most sellers think they lose control the more they tell them. No, you can tell them and share the information
Yeah.
and still stand your ground. As long as you've told them, they'll be good with it.
Okay.
And then let them decide.
All right. So tell me about an inspection before you put your house on the market. How valuable is that? I personally, I haven't ever recommended it because I didn't feel it was necessary.
Yes.
I mean, are you seeing a lot of that?
We are finding more and more of it. And I think what we're seeing is 2 times in which we're going to see it. One is when it's a very unique house and a house that might be very difficult to appraise. So they want to have all their ducks lined up, and they want to know exactly what they have going into this, because when they do get those few buyers, they want to make sure that all their I's are dotted, all their T's are crossed.
Like if they had radiant heat or something like that in a house, those are
Or,
the types of things that
yeah,
people
or
don't
it's
know
got
too
an
much about.
in-law apartment and there aren't many of those on the market.
Yep.
Anything that makes it completely different than others in the market. The other time that you're going to find it is when you see one of many, like it's a cookie cutter and there are 10 others that they're competing against.
Okay.
That's when people say, well, I got 9 others I can go to. So they want to make sure everything is done up front, they know exactly what they've got, and they stay in control. So those are the 2 times that we're finding these pre-listing inspections coming out, and that we're doing quite a few of them.
I'd like to ask you about the cost of a
Sure.
pre-listing inspection and also the cost of an inspection.
One of the things that a lot of people ask us, is it cheaper to do a pre-listing inspection? It's actually more time consuming on our part.
Is it?
It is. Number one, we're educating the homeowner
Yeah.
instead of the buyer. Difference there is they may have more questions on how to do things and what steps they should take first. So we're spending more time there. The next thing is we bind the report for them for when they do go to sell it.
Okay, all
And we'll
right.
put a sign out in front with the listing agent sign that says this house has just been inspected by SIS. See your realtor for details.
Oh, all
So
right.
as people are driving by, they have more confidence in that house because they know it's already
Been
been
inspected.
inspected. Yeah. So because of that, it's more expensive for us. It's more time consuming. And at the same time, we're being as thorough as we can for the seller so that they're in the driver's seat and they know what they need to do. So the cost of that is going to be about the same as it's going
It
to
is,
be for,
okay.
yeah. Yep.
All right.
So on average, you're looking about $400 for an inspection that's somewhere around the 2,000 square foot range.
Okay, all right. And if there has been a pre-inspection, do the buyers still do an inspection?
Sometimes.
Sometimes they do and
Yes.
sometimes they don't.
Yep.
Wow, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, it all depends on how confident the buyers are in the information.
Okay.
The better the presentation, the more confident that they are and the more ready they are to move forward.
Okay. I have when I walk through a house with people, I always say, if it smells good, the basement is dry, this house has been well taken care of, and I always say it's been a well taken care of and loved house. Do you feel that when you walk in a house, or is that my craziness?
No, there is definitely, even as an inspector, when we go into a house, we will know when someone has maintained it. Now, we
Okay.
know at a different level. It's not whether someone just baked cookies and put them in the oven. We know from a different perspective. We know
Okay.
when someone just freshly painted something to put it on the
Yeah.
market and painted over a bunch of rot that was there. So that's what we're looking for. If something's been maintained and consistently maintained, as opposed to we just did it in the last year to
make
spruce
sure
it
it was
up a
ready
little bit.
ready for the
And
market.
it definitely shows up.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, so if someone was thinking of, we'll say they didn't have a lot of available cash,
Yes.
what would be 3 things that they should concentrate on if they're thinking of putting their house on the market? Now, I'm talking outside, inside, basement. What 3 things are your hot buttons?
Well, it's interesting because if you ask us as inspectors, it's going to be different than if you ask a stager or a realtor,
That's right. Mm-hmm.
The realtor's going to say kitchens and bathrooms sell,
Yep.
right? To us, if they are functioning, we don't care. What we care more about is the furnace, the air conditioning system. The electrical panels are hot buttons, but not from a cost perspective.
They're not, yeah.
Usually those are fairly inexpensive to take care of electrical issues. It's more when you're talking about covering something up that could be of magnitude. You're covered up knob and tube wiring, or you've got fuses, but you've put a circuit breaker panel over in another area and left the fuse box in an old area. Well, that's where you can start running into some
some
costs
dollars.
from the
Okay.
electrical end. As far as the overall house goes, the area I would be concerned about is the heating system, air conditioning if you have one,
Yeah.
and then, of course, your roof.
Okay.
Those are the areas.
Those are the big
and
components.
basement. Basement from the standpoint of water entry
Yep.
and potential mold. So those
Okay.
are the areas that we see tend to scare people. They see the big dollars.
All right. When you walk down the basement, can you smell if it's been wet down there? If they've had
Typically,
consistent,
yeah, or you can smell what they're using to cover it up. Potpourri or Glade or whatever it might be.
All right. We're talking about basements, and one of the other issues that everyone's afraid of is mold. I
Yes.
mean, we hear about it in Florida all the time, and so we have dehumidifiers going, and what are some easy ways to prevent mold?
Well, understanding, first of all, where mold comes from, what the initiation is. And the initiation for mold growth is moisture. Now, mold is everywhere in the world, and it's something that we need to help break materials down out in the woods and out in the world. We don't need it in our house because we don't want things to break down. The issue is that what causes its initiation is moisture. Now, that moisture can either be water, or it can be humidity or condensation. And so when we look at those three things, it could be your air conditioning system that's leaking or dripping, causing an issue. It could be a roof leak. It could be improper ventilation or improper conditioning of a space or environment. So because of those, it's not as cut and dry. Make sure that your air conditioning system is working properly and that it's properly maintained. Make sure that your basement and attic are either conditioned or ventilated the way that they're supposed to, and that takes an education all by itself.
That's a whole different thing.
But a dehumidifier would be good, and don't just run out and buy a dehumidifier. They're supposed to be sized for
That's
the
right.
square footage
Yep.
of the environment.
That's true. I didn't know that till I just bought my last ones. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. And I think
Yep.
they run really well, and
Yep.
they really.
And control of gutters and grading on the exterior will certainly help control the water in the basement area.
I have a client who's getting water in their lower level, and I went around and I said, you know what, your gutter's pouring right down here.
Yes.
Change it. He changed
Yes.
it, and that was the end of it.
Stopped it, sure.
I mean, it was a very simple fix.
And that's a maintenance item, right? Cleaning your gutters, extending your gutter leaders out, and making sure that the water is draining off away from the house.
Yeah, I would really like to do a show about the inspections because on the state disclosures, there's nothing about gutters.
Yes, that's right.
And the gutters are causing problems because the pine needles, I've never had a house with pine needles, but pine needles that'll clog it up in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
And then if you have a bad storm like we've been having, then the water backs up and it's a mess.
Sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, David, I can't believe it. We're out of time already, but thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
And I really would like to do one on disclosures. That's really a hard one for the agents.
Yes.
All right,
Yep. Yep,
thanks.
we'll do that.
Thank you very much for being with us. Don't despair. The real estate market is still really very good. But we have to work through a few things, and the more educated we get on things like our inspections and our state disclosures, the better off we're going to be.
Yes.
Thank you very much for being with us today, and see you next time. Bye now.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.